Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm talking about my third year now attending LA Comic Con. So, I've been here now several times at this downtown LA convention center for this con in particular, but also a couple of other ones. And this one, it seems to get more and more crowded every year from my experience now since I've been going. But that said, this year it felt much more organized because they had now dividers. So then walking through the hallways to get to panel rooms and things like that and to autographs and everything and to get from one hall to another, there was dividers. So then people going in one direction and people going in the other, because in the previous 2 years that I've gone, it was just like a mass of people. And then it still was like the whole big area where you walk in after you get your badge, and there's a whole area leading up to the main stage. That area is super crowded with photo ops. And again, I'm always happen to just, at the opportune moment, see the whole big group of people, many people all together, all in different superhero costumes, taking a photo, which is really cool. And so there were a lot of Deadpool. Certainly I even heard Bye Bye Bye. I love that song had a resurgence because of Deadpool versus Wolverine. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. And bye 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 bye, any millennial, I still love Backstreet Boys, but NSYNC, come on, I'm hoping for new NSYNC stuff. Can't wait for that. But as always, I looked through Artist Alley, which was a lot of cool stuff. Here and there I just kind of picked up a card, people have their business cards, so nothing really caught my eye to buy with any of that in particular this year. In the past, I bought stuff from artists that had caught my attention, but this time I just was appreciating all of the artwork and cool stuff people had that they had made. But I was mostly, of course, excited for the panels. So with this convention, they have their own app, so you download the app and then you can look through the schedule and then select things you want to go to. So that makes it easier to remind you this is happening at this time, and to got to get to where it is and stuff. So that's helpful. So I knew of a few things I wanted to go to. And so the first panel that I went to was for Rick and Morty, 100 years, Rick and Morty. I just consider myself a casual fan of Rick and Morty. I find it interesting, and I like the writing. I like the world building of it. And obviously there was the whole controversy last year. No need to get into it with, the co-creator being fired. So then they hired 2 new voice actors to replace Rick and Morty. And it is, I'm going off the top of my head, Harry and Ian something. I can't remember off the top of my head now. And I could look it up, but I'm just kind of winging this, so apologies. But Harry's the one who plays Morty, and Ian plays Rick. And then Spencer Grammer was there, who plays Summer. And she says she's been voicing Summer, believe it or not, since 2011. I didn't know that because the series premiered in 2013. So it's the 3 of them at the main stage panel. And I just have to say, Harry, who plays Morty, he, to me, is the embodiment of Morty. He's if Morty were a real life person, that's what he would look like. He's just tall, short brown hair, glasses. I know Morty doesn't wear glasses, but maybe when he gets older, who knows? But so, and then the voice actor for Rick, I could see how he's Rick. But they had said they had voiced in the audition process, going back and forth between both characters, because I guess they wanted to see if they could do one or the other, which would be stronger, whatever. But they had also said that it seems like they wanted to intentionally hire 2 different voice actors for each role now. And so they talked about being fans of the series, then how now it's an advantage and disadvantage to then voice the characters now, because yes, there's a whole past 6 seasons to go off of with the role, but then also they wanted the sound alike with the voice, but then just embodying the characters and just staying true to the characters and everything. And then they were talking about season 7 moments. They brought up that spaghetti episode. And then I was hoping for whenever they do these panels, I'm always hoping for give us a little bit of the character voices here and there, of course. So then when Harry did the, like, I don't remember the episode names, but the episode when, like, I don't even remember what it's called. Gosh, sorry. I'm like having a, oh no, my brain. This was clearly a mistake. Whatever. He just keeps saying, open your minds. That. So he did that. My face lit up. I was like, oh my God. My sister and I loved that. That was so funny to us, that in particular. So he did that. And then someone at one point asked if, because like they couldn't really say anything about season 8, of course, but someone asked if if Morty and Jessica will get married in season 8, but in particular, he's like, well, in season 8, I can't say anything. And then like, he was like, well, would Rick officiate? And he'd be like, nah, Rick wouldn't care. And then whatever, it's like, what would he have to gain from that? Which is funny. And then, but I did like a quick like back and forth as Rick and Morty. So that brought me joy. And then also like they're talking about how Spencer Grammer, since she's been on since the beginning as Summer, she was saying like, yeah, I took you guys under my wing. And then she's like, nah, I'm just kidding. And then like they were like, no, seriously, like you've been great and stuff. So that's really cute. Like just seeing this kind of, because they're newer to voicing these characters, but obviously they were very welcome. Then they're doing a really wonderful job. And so like kudos to them. I just thought that was really nice. And then they also at some point someone asked what other roles they would want to do. And Spencer said she thinks it would be cool to she'd love to voice a character on The Simpsons, and she would love to voice like an illegitimate daughter of Sideshow Bob. And Sideshow Bob, if you don't know, is voiced by Kelsey Grammer, her dad. So I was like, that would actually be really, really hilarious. And then she said like, oh, she would try to get revenge on Bart. And then the moderator was like, oh, would she try to like date Bart? And then she'd be like, oh, that would be interesting too. So, just this fun stuff. And so that was a fun panel. It ended with Ian saying Wubba Lubba Dub Dub, of course, Oh gosh. But they mentioned like the episode, which was fantastic, the season 7 finale, like that that whole concept, and saying how it felt for them because they had to keep recording it in different ways and stuff. Just hearing a little bit about the process, because Harry, he said like he has like just this like vocal technique he does, like the I can't do it, it's like with the lips, and then Spencer was doing something where another vocal technique of saying like all this stuff that kind of rhymes and sounds similar. I could not even attempt to do it even if I wanted to, just like these vocal techniques that actors have. So that's really cool too. Just hearing a little bit about the process, and looking forward to season 8 clearly. And they just teased it saying if you love season 7, you'll love season 8. So, I'm looking forward to that, of course, because it's just on its own, it's just a fun, interesting show with all of obviously the, different universes they go in, like all the sci-fi of it all. It's really interesting. So, and actually what Ian said too was that his first official recording as Rick was doing the Rick and Jerry stuff, which I had forgotten about that. Like when Rick and Jerry are fused together. I think he said it's episode 2 of season 7. So that's interesting to me. I guess they didn't have to, record in order because they had to go back and record, But so that's interesting. So he said like that has a special place in his heart now, like that particular moment, because having to like match. And then he said like he's always been a fan of Chris Parnell, of course, who voices Jerry. So that was interesting. So again, like them showing appreciation for the show itself, but then also now as actors taking over these roles as these characters. So it's cool. So that was a fun panel. And afterward, I was super, super excited because it was a panel for Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I feel like I'm definitely due now for a rewatch of Avatar. I've really only watched it through twice because during the pandemic, it was when I first really sat down and watched it, except for the finale. Like literally, I didn't watch the finale. And then 3 years later, I finally watched the finale after doing a second full watch through of the series. And I finally watched the finale, and then I talked about it on the podcast, of course, with Harry Mackin. So that was a fun episode, obviously. But so I was like, oh, hell yeah, Avatar, let's go. And there were a lot of cool cosplayers. There were people who were dressed as like Ty Lee, Azula, May, like, all of that. I think there was a Toph, I think there was definitely a Cabbage Merchant, there was a Zuko. The guy who was dressed as Zuko, he asked a question, and he was decked out as Zuko, and it was season 1 Zuko. So, he had the ponytail. So, like, That was really cool seeing that. But so the panel, it was, it was just pretty random. It wasn't all of them, but they did get the Avatar himself, Zach Tyler Eisen. He was there. So it was him, and then Jack DeSena, of course, Sokka, and then Olivia Hack, Ty Lee, and then Jenny Kwan, Suki, and then James Tsai, the cabbage merchant. So amazing, pretty amazing. So unfortunately, Dante Bosco wasn't there, who of course voices Zuko. And also Greg Baldwin wasn't there, who voices Uncle Iroh. And then also Mae Whitman wasn't there, who of course voices Katara. And actually also Jillian, I think her name is Jillian Murphy? No, I think that's her name. Yeah, because originally she went by Jessie Flowers. No, sorry, Michaela Murphy. She wasn't there. Of course, Toph, badass Toph, and Azula, she wasn't there, Grey Delisle. But, I mean, the Avatar, he's like one of the rare ones. So him at a con, that's like makes it special, Oh gosh. Because, Avatar, the series, it'll be turning 20 next year, as in the original run of Avatar. It's going to be celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's premiered back in 2005. So, as always, time freaking flies, Oh gosh, how fitting. The Avatar flies. Okay, now I'm really saying dumb stuff. Oh gosh, that's not even funny, is it? That's sort of a pun. Yeah, that's sort of a pun. Whatever. But... well, so, the moderator was good asking them all, individual questions. He asked Jenny about the role of Suki, as a leader and stuff, and then Jenny was saying how she connected with that, because she said, it's different if you would connect, if you played, a serial killer, but with Suki, thankfully, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, I can imagine playing, a genuinely sinister villain, but, she said with Suki, she admires her in so many ways. Also, they sang the praises, Zach in particular and Jack. And then I was like, oh, wait, they're Zach and Jack. I never, pieced that together. Their names rhymed. Okay. Oh, boy, I'm pointing out such dumb stuff. This is a mistake right now. But he said they both brought up Andrea Romano because they all recorded separately. Well, not all of them. Zach recorded separately because he lives in New York. So at the time he recorded... or he was living in Connecticut. He recorded in New York at the time. So, and then I think Jack would usually record with May, and then sometimes with Dante, and then maybe also with Gray sometimes. Who knows? I don't know. Because I think Dante would then sometimes record with Gray, and with after Mako had passed, to them with Greg, who took over the role of Uncle Iroh. But they both mentioned how getting the chemistry between all the characters, that was all Andrea Romano, knowing how to draw that out of them. So I was like, that's really sweet, singing her praises, because they mentioned she's just a legendary voice director, did so many acclaimed series. And then of course they ask about favorite episodes, and Zach said the guru stuff and the spirituality, he found that really compelling, especially for a kid's show, because that always gets brought up about how at the time they didn't know what this show was, and then it just seemed like it wouldn't be a show that's on Nickelodeon of all places, because Nickelodeon is mostly known for its wackier shows for the most part. Again, broadly speaking, obviously there are exceptions, but this is being serialized and all that stuff. Jack highlighted that. But so then he mentioned his favorite episode is Siege of the North, which is the season 1 finale. And Olivia mentioned the beach episode, and then also Azula acting it's so cringy seeing her trying to flirt, when she's trying to be an actual regular teenager. And then Jenny mentioned Appa's Lost Days, and then I think James mentioned any episode that he was in or something like that. He mentioned it was funny, But so I'm trying to remember other stuff. But at the end, there was only time for 2 audience questions. So of course they picked the guy who was decked out as Zuko, and he was so funny. So he held up he had a scroll of Aang, a wanted poster of Aang, and he's like, Avatar, I've been looking for you. And then Zach, too funny, playing along, he went under the table immediately. That was so funny. I was like, he knows how to, mad respects to Zach. I was really, I went up to the front to see the Avatar panel. I was like, I gotta get up close to see them. And I forgot to mention what the guy dressed as Zuko, like what he asked was like, oh, so how do you have like such a good skin routine? And I was thinking to myself, is that like a joke? I don't know what he's getting at. But then of course, Zach, like just being in tune with like the fandom, he was just like, oh yeah, well, of course, be like 112 years old, I know. And of course, like being in an iceberg, it does wonders for your skin. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Okay. Again, I'm really impressed by him. It was cute to me. Because he like left the industry, but like not fully, like as in with acting, and then he just was doing more stuff behind the scenes over the years. So like once that show ended, he had done stuff previously like with voice acting, but then he just went on to college, like did other stuff with his life. And so he's just like so down to earth, and yet has such an appreciation for the fandom and for Avatar. And then he said because like he was 12 at the time recording, like so he grew up with Aang too, literally. So there are parts of Aang that he feels like influenced him, and like so I don't know, just really cool. But I just appreciate how much he's like in tune with the fandom, clearly, like as the Avatar, as Aang, and Jack too, like he plays up like the silliness and stuff, and that's just like his personality though, but like he's great. Jack DeSena, he's too funny. But so then the other person asked, she was wearing like a Katara outfit, though I remember that. Oh, she asked what would Suki, like if Suki was a bender, what would she bend? Because like she said she's from the Earth Kingdom, what would she bend? And then she actually said water. And then she said because it would be cool to, like she mentioned, like water is really cool, then also to be able to blood bend. And then Jack was just like, everyone always says that about blood bending, but like just say you want to fire bend. Like, it was too funny. And then like at the very end, just before he left, he gave us all a, what a tribe, amazing. But like, I don't know, Zach just kind of stood out to me. Like he shook the moderator's hand afterward, and like he had a moment with like hugging Olivia, and then Jack, I was like, he seems like such a sweetheart. I was like, oh gosh. And one more thing I forgot to mention that just came to me now. So before the Avatar The Last Airbender panel, so they had someone come out and was like doing an intro it was with IGN. So he was like doing a whole intro, I guess, to live stream the event, whatever. And so they told us, like the crowd, to like cheer the whole time. Like we were clapping like the whole time. The guy was like, getting us pumped, and like we were clapping. And then like cheering and stuff, and then these dudes next to me at one point, like they're screaming stuff, and then this one dude just goes like, Ladle, 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 and I was crying laughing. I was like, I didn't even look at him, I was just like, hear it next to me. I'm like, what the hell? Oh my god, it was so funny. I was like, you do you, keep being you. That was amazing. So I don't know, so maybe you could find that online somewhere, but I don't know if you'd be able to hear it. Probably not, but oh my god. So that was I can't believe I forgot that. I just remember that now. I had to say that. So hysterical. Oh my god. And in case you don't know what that's from, that's of course Patrick from, SpongeBob SquarePants. I feel like I don't need to say that, but just in case you didn't know, that's too funny. From that Flying Dutchman episode. It's iconic, obviously. Amazing, oh my gosh. And then I went to like a few panels I knew I wanted to go to. One was mostly like for animation stuff I was interested in. So I first went to one about writing for animation. And what they more or less were talking about a lot was that they talked about like the limitations of animation in terms of like one of them, and I don't remember any of their names off the top of my head right now. Well, no, Craig Miller was one of them. That's an easy name to remember. But talking about essentially that like he had written, say, something like, oh, so there's 200 ghosts in this scene, but that like the animators can't animate all of that, so then it was only down to like 6, and then like having to work with that limitation. And then another one was talking about how like, oh, I had 3 judges at that scene, but that only one of them was talking. And then at the time it was like, if you have 9 lines and under, and then if it was 10 or more, then you have to like, I guess, get another, like pay the actor more, or it was just like something like that. So like the limitations with that, I was like, this is all interesting because it's stuff you don't really think about, because like the budget of it all is what that boils down to. And like talking about like props and stuff. But what they said, it's more so about like being able to really listen and like problem solve, in the sense of like, are you going to be like someone who's helpful and like make someone's life easier in that sense. So that makes sense. Like, so it's not just about doing the work, but then also really listening to whatever like the notes are, whatever the network wants, whatever like the showrunner wants, stuff like that. And just knowing that like you're writing to, like, it's not just about what you want as a writer, it's more so like what the show needs, whatever that may be. So that was interesting to me. And then also, speaking of shows, I just remembered too, like with the Avatar panel, they were also asked about like their favorite Nicktoons, like their favorite Nickelodeon shows other than Avatar growing up. And then another reason why I like Zach, he said, well, actually, I've always been a fan of SpongeBob. And then we were like, yeah, SpongeBob. And then he said, but also recently I went back and watched Rugrats. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I love Rugrats, man. I'm thinking to myself, Rugrats is my fave. And then Jack mentioned like Angry Beavers. And then, of course, he also mentioned Hey Arnold. And then, of course, he's like, of course, Olivia Hack, because, of course, she's Rhonda on Hey Arnold. So then Jenny also said, like, well, we didn't have cable growing up. So, oh, gosh, that's too funny. But anyway, so that animation panel was really interesting. Just an interesting perspective about writing for animation. And then afterward, I went to a panel also about the production side of animation. There was a few different people, like one was on production, one was like a director. I can't remember her name, but she's been on The Simpsons, she said, for like 20 some odd years. And then Ashley Crystal, she actually first started out like with acting, and then now she also is a writer for animation. She wrote for Craig of the Creek, and then she's a co-executive producer of the new Fairly Odd Parents reboot, A New Wish. And then she voices Hazel, and she also voices Babs Bunny in the new Tiny Toons, whatever it's called. Tiny Toons University, yeah, that's what it's called. Then also Grace, who voiced Grace in Inside Out 2. So another voice actress. So they were talking about different aspects of animation as well. So people asked about breaking in, and similar in the panel before that with the writing for animation, what they said was about going to events, like networking and like looking around at your peers, because people in the same boat as you, it's like these people are going to hire you like on the same level. And then also basically it's like, you know, don't be an asshole, which is something that's been said by like my screenwriting teachers, like don't be an asshole. Like the fact that it has to be said is ridiculous, but obviously there's a fair share of assholes out there, you know. But basically like doing the work, of course, but then getting yourself out there in terms of going to events and like say, like, you know, you're putting yourself out there, like I want to write, and then like leading to what it can lead to, like, you know, meeting more people and getting your work in the hands of agents, producers who can get you the work, you know. So that's the path I'm on. I'm still going on this path. And like the guy with production, he was saying basically like his job is to say no, and again it's because of like budget stuff. It's like, nope, you can't do this, you can't do that, you know. So that's too funny. But just hearing about other stuff for them too, like, you know, outside of their careers was nice too. Because like they mentioned, like at the beginning, they like the moderator was saying, tell us about your week. And so the one woman was saying like, oh, me and my kids, we went shopping for Halloween costumes, like went to Party City. And then the other guy was like, oh, me and my son were, I forget what he said about his son now. The girl was like, oh, well, I'm like still in college. It's like, oh gosh, she's really young, that one that voiced Grace. But she was just so like bubbly and stuff, like has a great personality. And then Ashley was saying, well, my week was okay. Like, unfortunately, my bike was stolen. I was like, oh no. We were all like, oh no, that's terrible. She said, like, it was stolen out of my garage. I was like, oh, geez, that's terrible. That's awful. Poor Ashley. But, you know, then she's like, but I still had a great week other than that. I was like, oh, damn, I mean, what are you going to do? Stuff happens. But I appreciate them like sharing other stuff, like about their personal lives, you know? So she talked about how, like with Fairly Odd Parents and like learning about fandom and everything, because obviously that is a huge franchise. And then now this is A New Wish. So like putting their own spin on it with, like, you know, Dimadelphia and like writing the series Bible for that, which that's really cool. You know, that's really fun. And again, like breaking in, you know, that's always like an ongoing thing, and it changes all the time because there's no one right path. There's no one path in. It's just kind of like taking classes and, doing all this stuff, going to these events and working on your craft, more or less that, and then meeting more people, and then eventually like opening more doors. You can see what it will lead to. Because like for Ashley, she said she kind of she was more so into acting, primarily acting, and then like theater and stuff. But then now, because like she was able to she wanted to pursue writing too. So then like working first on Craig of the Creek, and then now like, being the EP of the new Fairly Odd Parents. So that's really cool. She says like this is a whole like sideways thing that I wasn't expecting, but I absolutely love it, working in animation. So that was really cool. And then after that was like a really packed panel too. I then went to a panel in a room I hadn't been in before in this convention center. It was like a theater room. It reminded me of being in college again, like sitting there, except it was more like a theater though. But it just reminded me of college, I guess, because like the tiered seats, like the big screen just reminded me. I don't know, for a second I was like, it's been like a while since I've been in a room like this. That's just what it felt like in the moment to me. I don't know, because it wasn't like one of the regular conference rooms where these other panels are. But it was really fascinating because it was about post-production. So it was an editor for Only Murders in the Building, which I tried. Well, I've only watched the pilot for that show, and I can't really say that it didn't catch my interest. I'm sure it's a good show and all, but I don't know. Maybe eventually I'll have to give it another chance. But with the pilot, I was like, just wasn't feeling it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just my opinion of the show based on the one episode. But the scene they showed us was really cool because it was Steve Martin singing, and then as he's singing, they're showing you what's going on, like behind the scenes with them trying, I guess, as in the other characters. I know it's Martin Short and Selena Gomez, and then also Meryl Streep is in this latest season, I guess. And I think Paul Rudd was in it too, but not in this clip they showed. I just remember that though. But so they show her too at one point, Meryl Streep. Like the Meryl Streep. So the scene was cool, like showing him singing and then like them trying to resolve something and like the cops watching. So like it builds the tension and like it's swiping between the screens and stuff, like showing you Steve Martin and then like, showing them like looking at some document that's all shredded up, trying to piece it together. Like that was really, really cool editing, obviously. And so then the next clip was from, I don't know what the show was called. It might have been a movie. I think it was a movie, but it was just like highlighting the music. So this guy he's a composer working on the music, and he plays piano by trade. So he started with piano, but basically how like it captures like the mood and the essence of the piece that he's trying to go for. And then the last clip they showed was someone who did the sound design for I didn't even know this was a thing. There is a new, like I guess came out last year or a year or two ago, maybe. I don't know. But it's a Tony Hawk documentary, which just seeing the opening scene made me want to watch it now. I'm going to have to check it out. I believe looks like it's on Max, I think. I'm not certain though, because it said HBO, but who knows. But Tony keeps wiping out and his frustration with that. And then in a voiceover, he says that like if you think you're gonna fail, you go in with that mindset, then you're gonna fail. It's like gonna come to fruition. So again, it's like all about perspective and stuff. But like you feel the frustration. And then one really amazing shot to me was like when he falls, he's like curled up on the ground and then just he's still on the ground, and then the wheels are just there like in the forefront spinning. I was like, this is really cool how this was shot. But like the sound of it all too, like just hearing like the echoes and like the scraping of the wheels and stuff. I was like, damn, this is really cool to me. And so what he said afterward was that it was all about capturing the mood. Like you're in Tony's head, you feel his frustration. I was like, yep, you definitely do. Like there were some groans, like in a good way, like, oh, like we felt it in that moment of him when he kept wiping out. I don't know. I found that really compelling. And again, this is stuff I don't usually always consciously think of. Like speaking for myself, I say you as in like the royal you, of course. But so again, like just the post-production side of things, like not always just the writing and acting, but like the other elements that go into like episodes of TV and these movies and documentaries in this case. So again, like I do find it really interesting. So even hearing like the other guy in that other panel talking about like the production side and then like how that could lead to other roles, like even with Ashley first doing acting and then leading into writing and then doing both now, like something can lead to something else that you're not expecting, like a wonderful surprise. So that's a good reminder too. I'm just reminding myself that, like, even though like I'm so focused on writing, there's still other paths to take too within the broad scope of TV, movies, media, and all this great stuff, you know? So then afterwards, after that panel, that was the last thing on my schedule that I had. And then I was like, okay, I'm probably going to get going soon. But then I went back to I was like, because it's getting late, like there's a couple more hours left of the con. And like by that point, like I'm just kind of exhausted. Eventually, like my energy drains, and like I had gotten food before earlier too, but I was like, okay, I'm just like getting, I'm like just about ready to go. But I was like, let me just, as always, like since I'm done checking out the panels and stuff that I wanted to see, I just went back to the place where I had come in from, because like you go pick up your badges. Like you follow the signs and you follow everyone, like all the crowds and stuff. But so it was the gaming hall. So like there's like the main hall with all the main stage and like artist alley and stuff, and then there's more stuff in the gaming hall. There's like the gaming stage, and then there were people signing. And so I went there specifically because I was like, where's the West Hall? And I wanted to go to the West Hall specifically because earlier with the Avatar panel, they said like, oh, we're going to be in the West Hall signing if you want to come see us. And I was like, I kind of want to go meet Zach, the Avatar. I was like, I think I want to go meet him. I just, want to meet him. And like, he's not always at these, he's like a rare one at these conventions. So I was like, I want to go. I might as well. Why not? So I went over there, and I'm going to be totally honest. I had a bad case of the nerves, like so bad. Like I was pacing at one point, like up and down, like just seeing the other people that were there too. I'm like, okay, I see Zach. I'm going to go over there. I'm like, nope, no, I'm not. I'm losing my nerve. I was like, but he's right there. It was bad. And again, I get like that because I build things up in my head and I get so nervous, and it's like ridiculous because the same thing happened to me like before I talked about this. If you go back and listen to my episode about ToonCon that I went to last year, I was so damn nervous to meet Darren Norris. And then, of course, he's delightful, and he was so much fun to talk to. And I'm glad I asked him what I wanted to ask him. So, like, I had to work up the nerve with that. So similar with this. So, like, I left, and then I was, like, really, really losing my nerve to the point where, like, I was going to leave. But thankfully I did work up my nerve. Obviously, I did, because otherwise I wouldn't be, I got to share it on the podcast often just for myself. And also then, again, I get myself worked up. I don't know why, but then as always, like I'm able to, come back down and like realize that they're just people. And like, obviously it's just like a fan interaction. It's not that deep, not at all, but this is just how I am. I get super nervous to the point where like I have to work up the nerve. So that's just how I am. In this case, it was with Zach. But first though, I was like looking around. I was like, is there anything I want to buy? It's like last call. I'm telling myself, do I want to get anything? And every year they have these, like they were there last year and the year before. I didn't buy one last year, but the first year I went, I had bought myself like a Nickelodeon one. So they have these mystery boxes of all these different franchises. And so then I'm looking, I'm like, okay, is there an Avatar one? Because if there is, that's just like a sign, I got to buy it. And of course there was. I was like, okay, I'll get an Avatar one. So I did. And so then I went back. So then what happened was, it was maybe, I don't know how long it had been. But so then when I went back, I was like, oh no, he left. I was like, of course, this is what I get for waiting too long. I was like, damn it, I missed my chance. So he had left. I was like, no. But then for whatever reason, I was still not fully ready to leave. There's still like almost an hour left of the con. Like it was almost 6:00 and the con was ending at 7. Because then also Jack DeSena was there, but he had left too. So I didn't get to meet Jack, but hopefully I'll get to meet Jack at some point. Same with I'd love to meet Dante too. But really all of them. I'd love to also meet, of course, Michaela, who voices Toph, because Toph is freaking badass, man. But anyway, I mean, they all are in their own way. They all are, really. So then what happens is, when I'm super nervous to meet a specific person for whatever reason in my head, what I do then is, I was like, let me just go up and meet someone that I'm not for whatever nervous to meet. I was like, that just kind of helps me break open my shell that I unintentionally encase myself in, my nervous shell of myself that I just do to myself. It's kind of like more of an introvert thing. I don't know what it is exactly. It's a whole big thing of being too in my own head, more or less, is what it is. But everything always works out in the end. But so what I did was so I had my avatar box, this is like an icebreaker in a way, I'm telling myself. So what I did then was I just walked up to James Tsai, of course, the cabbage merchant. I was like, he's over there. Let me go say hi to him. So I walked up to him. I was like, hey, James, I'm Allie. He's like, oh, hi, Allie. Nice to meet you. He's like, my sister's name is Allie. I was like, oh, really? And then I was like, how does she spell it? And then he said A-L-I. I was like, me too. Awesome. So, because like sometimes people spell it A-L-Y or whatever, A-L-L-I-E. There's a bunch of ways to spell Allie. But he said like short for Allison. I was like, me too. So that alone was like great. I didn't buy anything from him though. Like he had like these cool squishy cabbages. Like they were kind of like, you know how like a stress ball, but it's like a little bigger than a stress ball. Like they were cabbages, and like he would sign them. And then he said those cost $60. He also had prints, of course. He had a cool cabbage merchant pin that like spins because of course like the cabbage is getting destroyed. So I was like, this is all really amazing stuff. And he said like the proceeds go to a charity for, I forget now. I think it was like to help out women. I was like, oh, that's really wonderful. That's beautiful that he does that. But so I was talking to him a little bit, and I was like, what a role just based on like such a small thing of my cabbages. And he was like, I know, it really is amazing. And then I was saying to him, I told him, I was disappointed he wasn't in the finale. And then he said, actually, he wasn't in all of book 3. And then I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Because again, I've only watched through the episodes, like the entire series. Really, I've only watched through it once, but up until the finale, I've only watched it through twice so far. But I had forgotten that. And then he had said, but they say like, in the Ember Island Players that like, oh, we got a lot of this information from a disgruntled cabbage merchant of cabbage, something like that. I was like, oh, that's right. And then I said like, oh, wait, but then in Korra. And then he said, yeah, in Korra, they mentioned like his son then. I was like, oh, that's right. Because I just watched, all of Korra that I talked about earlier this year on this podcast. But I forgot that. I was like, oh, that's right. They franchised it. So that was really cool. And then I had the box there. Then he's like, oh, so, and I showed him. I was like, oh, yeah, so I got this box. And he's like, oh, well, what's in it? I was like, I don't know. I just took a chance and bought it. He's like, oh, well, are you going to open it? I was like, yeah. I was like building suspense. And then he's like, well, let's open it. I was like, okay, let's open it. So I was like, yeah, why not? Let me just open it. So that was good, like having just something else to be like, yeah, here you go. I know there's just a bunch of cool stuff. And there's like a hat, there's like an Aang plushie, there's like a Momo pot holder thing, there's like an Aang oven mitt. I was like, this is cute stuff. I don't know. So I was happy with it then. The mystery element adds to it. So then I just like shook his hand again. I was like, pleasure chatting with you, James. That was pretty much it. It was just more so like, because then I also said to him, I was like, wait, but you're also in the live action? And he's like, yeah. And he pointed to the print. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Again, you're the cabbage merchant in the live action version of Avatar, as in the Netflix series. So that was just funny. So it was a pleasure chatting with him. So then now with more confidence in myself, and that, well, actually what I said to him, I was like, oh gosh, because like that point I didn't know Zach was coming back. And then he's like, well, I think we're all supposed to be here till 7. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, because I was like, oh, I just wanted to say hi to Zach. And he's like, well, I think he should be coming back. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, that's so nice chatting with you. And he's like, nice chatting with you too. So I didn't buy anything from him though, not yet. Like, I didn't this time around, but maybe next time. But so he was just so wonderful, so lovely. So then what I did was like I walked up to the empty table, and then sure enough, the little sticky note said back at 6. I was like, okay, good. And I might as well wait it out. So then he came back a little bit after 6. And then another new little line had formed. I was like, ugh. Anytime there's a line that always like gets me worked up too, because it's like I'm building up in my head like the anticipation of going to meet this person. But it was a smaller line because like again, it was almost toward the end of the day for the convention. But so first I walked up to the Hansler, and then right away I was like, you look familiar. And then she's like, well, my name is Bridget. And then I was like, that sounds familiar. And then she says, by any chance, like, does the name Honor Society? And then I was like, oh my gosh, yes. So Bridget, she worked, so like when I started watching Avatar Last Airbender, so during the pandemic back in 2020, that's when it exploded in popularity again on Netflix and everything. So she was running that. It was a live stream every week with Dante Bosco, the voice of Zuko, Prince Zuko, pardon me, and she like was Dante's assistant at one point. So I knew her from the streams. I was like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. So like that was a pleasant surprise. I was like, I remember you too. So that was so cool. And then she was just telling me about how like, they don't do that anymore. But I was like, oh, I remember you guys raised money. She's like, yeah, for the Trevor Project, I believe it's called. So like doing those live streams. And then she says like they ended that, but then she still keeps in touch with Dante. They're just friends now. Like first she was his assistant, but now he has, I guess, other I don't know, doing other stuff. But she says like, yeah, I'm still like doing all this stuff with the Avatar universe. I was like, that's so cool. So she's still like involved with the fandom. So then I was like looking at the prices of stuff, and I'm looking at the Aang prints, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get the old autograph selfie combo, gotta do it, because this is, opportunity to meet Zach. And so before though, like right before I went up to him finally, then so he was signing this really amazing looking thing of, I don't even know what it was exactly. It was like a wooden piece of artwork of Sokka, Katara, Aang, Prince Zuko, and Toph. And so he held it up. I was like, damn, that's beautiful. I'm thinking to myself, because like he was the last signature. So she got all of their signatures. I was like, that's freaking cool. Like, I was like, damn, that's a really cool thing that this girl got. Amazing. Whoever made that, like, props to them. But I was like, wow, I was like blown away for a second by that. But so then finally it was my turn to meet Zach. So I went up to him. I said, hi, Zach, I'm Allie. Nice to meet you. And he's just so like genuinely down to earth, so sweet, so like, and I think really like a big part of it is because like he's in a way separated from the industry, but like has that experience from like when he was a kid. But then like, again, he's still like connected with the fandom. But so he was like, oh, so where are you from? I was like, I'm from New York. And he's like, oh, where in New York? I was like, so I was telling him. And then I was like, wait, so where are you from? And then I was like, oh, wait, yeah, because you were like in Connecticut. He's like, yeah, I live in Brooklyn now. I was like, oh, very cool. I was like, my grandparents lived in Brooklyn. And he's like, everyone's grandparents were from Brooklyn. I was like, oh, I guess. So I don't know. I guess I wonder if he sensed my like, my accent, or maybe he always asks people where they're from. I don't know, whatever. But so then, because beforehand too, I like think to myself, what's my like one little anecdote, or like what do I want to ask them about? Because like there's so much I would want to ask them about with Avatar and stuff. And then in Heights, I'm always like wishing I could ask more stuff, but again, like being mindful of their time. But like they don't rush you or anything. Like he was just very like, we're just like locked in having a conversation. So again, he just was very easy to talk to. But first I asked him like, oh, so what's like the big line everyone says? Is it like yip yip? He's like, yeah, that, and also the flameo. I was like, oh, I didn't really remember that, to be honest with you. I don't remember. Is that like book 3? I don't remember, whatever. But again, like sometimes I forget little details, not beings. I'm gonna have to rewatch again. But so he signed my print. I was like, oh, amazing. And so then like I asked him, I was like, well, I know what I want to ask him. I was like, well, so I want to ask you about like Katang. And then for you, like at the time as an actor, were you like rooting for them too? Or like, did you ever doubt that they would end up together? Like, was it like always obvious that they were going to end up together? And then what he said was, yeah, like as an actor, I was obviously rooting for Aang to get the girl. And then he said like, actually, like it wasn't a surprise to him, like when they ended up together, like he was happy that they ended up together. And then he said like, actually in the, like a little tidbit he told me was like in the script, like that was the first time they had mentioned Katang. He said like at the very end, he says like, oh, and then they kiss and Katang finally happens. So I guess like the creators came up with Katang. Like usually like I never know how ship names start, like if like the fandom comes up with that or whatever. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because like I mentioned like Katang and like Zutara. I know people love that pairing too. Because also I forgot to mention, I just remembered this now, that I brought up Korra to him too, and I said because like on the subject of Katang, basically that I like how we got to see their adult children in Korra. And I watched it for the first time this year. And he's like, oh, how'd you like it? And I was like, I liked it. In certain ways, it felt more mature than Avatar. But then obviously the OG, and I'm like pointing to the Aang print. He's like, oh, yeah, totally. But I asked him about like the live action Avatar and if he met Gordon, who plays Aang in the live action, the Netflix series. He's like, yeah, I have. I was like, oh, that's really cool. I was like, oh, because you guys like are so like, you have like the characteristics of Aang. I think that's really cool. And then he's like, actually, I was supposed to like see him today or something. Like I texted him. I was like, oh, interesting. So I was like, yeah, it's like passing up the torch, like this new generation of like the new versions of the characters. Because then I mentioned how like I know Dallas Liu, who plays Zuko, and then like Dante, like they had a conversation about Zuko now. So I was like, that's really cool. And when he was asking about me, like that, like just shows me like he's just like a genuine, like down to earth, nice person. He was like, I told him like, well, yeah, I'm from New York, but I moved out here because I'm pursuing writing. He's like, oh, well, that's really cool. And then afterwards, he's like, good luck with the writing. I was like, thanks. He was really sweet. I don't know. I would have loved to have talked to him more about like more stuff, but of course I'm just like my shipper brain just goes to like stuff like that. But he was really nice. So it was really cool talking to him and getting a photo. So I found the avatar, okay? I'm one of the millions of people who, I'm sure he hears that all the time, like, found the avatar. Awesome. Because also I asked him too, I just remembered, I asked him also, like, when did you get into doing cons? And he said, like, just last year. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, that's really cool. Because, like, now, like, it's all resurgence with the fandom. And then I said, like, oh, because next year's the 20th anniversary. He's like, yeah, it's going to be, I wonder what they'll have in store for that. Who knows? But so again, I appreciate how in tune he is with the fandom, but he's just like a regular chill dude, like despite all of that too. Because again, like, he's had other stuff obviously outside of his voice acting career, but then he has this one really cool, amazing role that like has so much depth with this character and with the writing in Avatar. So Avatar is just the gift that keeps on giving. So it was just so much fun chatting with Zach, who just is really wonderful, and I'm happy I worked up the nerve to meet him. And it's so ridiculous that I had to, it all worked out. Oh, because I showed him my Avatar mystery box that I had purchased too. So like I was showing him everything too. So he liked it. He thought it was cool. So that was really fun. And so then I was like, okay, now I'm good. Now I can leave. So again, another successful LA Comic-Con as always. Can't wait till my next one. And yip. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Check out storytellingsaga.com. And as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.